Good evening. There you go. Good evening and welcome to the Greater Lowell Community Foundation Celebrate Giving hybrid event. I am Sophan Smith, Executive Director of E4All Lowell, and I am your MC for this evening. This event focuses on cultural equity in Greater Lowell, and we are thrilled you can join us. And may I add, everyone looks amazing tonight. And for those that are at home that's joining us from the couch, you look comfortable. I'll join you in a couple of hours. Cultural equity embodies the values, policies, and practices that ensure that people are represented in a creative economy. Throughout this event, we will highlight key GLCF fiscally sponsored partners who are committed to creative justice. They exemplify the richness of our community. And tonight we have a full program, so you are in for a treat. So it's my pleasure to kick off our evening by introducing Stella, founder of the Lowell Chamber Orchestra. The Lowell Chamber Orchestra is the City of Lowell's first and only professional orchestra. So ladies and gentlemen, please, round of applause, welcome Orlando. That was pretty amazing. Can we give them another round of applause? Thank you again, Lowell Chamber Orchestra. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a wonderful way to start off their evening. It is certainly better than clicking on a Zoom link, don't you agree, for those that are in the room? To hear live music. It's been a while since I've heard live music. So now it is my pleasure and honor to introduce you, Chet. I would also like to thank the GLCF partners in philanthropy and celebrate giving event sponsors as well. We're so fortunate to live in such a generous community. It is also now my pleasure to introduce the GLCF President and CEO, a man that really needs no introduction, ladies and gentlemen. So welcome to the podium, Mr. Jay Linehan.
Wow, we've been doing this so often on Zoom. It's just so wonderful to look out and see everybody's face and everybody here. So that is really amazing. Thank you all for being here. Greetings from the Greater Lowell Community Foundation. I also, as Chet did, want to thank the staff. Yeah, the last 18 months have been a challenge. But I absolutely have to say that it's been a privilege for us to do the work we've done. With the nonprofits we've had the great pleasure to work with, to have the impact on the community that we live and work in. Yeah, it's hard work, but it's totally worth all of it, every bit of it. So thank you to all the staff, and thank you for the board. Chet, those were great. Thank you for your remarks, very kind. But a great board chair, a great board that is supportive of all the work we do, and they are there to support you. And anybody who works that has a board knows how important a good board is. So to the staff and to the board, thank you. And I'm pleased to be here this evening to talk about cultural equity. But of course, cultural equity you don't talk about in and of itself. It's talked about in the scope and through diversity, equity, and inclusion. And some 25 years ago, the Greater Lowell Community Foundation was founded. And it was founded on that principle, to include everybody in everything that we do, to provide opportunities and to address inequities in everything that we try to do. And we've done that over the years in a variety of different ways. And one of them is scholarships. We've been doing scholarships from out of the gate. And we've done millions of dollars worth of scholarships for thousands of students, predominantly at Lowell High, predominantly with students of color, predominantly of students that are the first in their family to go to college, and predominantly with students that have significant financial obligations or financial challenges to get to college. We give them that promise to go to college. We do it with our discretionary grant making in a variety of different ways. We have done it with a social equity piece. We've done it with our civic engagement piece. We've created a racial equity grants this particular year. And on top of that, we actually created the Racial Equity Action Fund. And then, of course, during this whole pandemic, I mean, as we looked around and as this whole thing started, and we sat down and said, well, how are we going to deal with all this? All the different things that we're doing. And I said, as we sat down, I said, when this is all said and done, and unfortunately we're still in it, I said, the most important thing that we do through this whole process is be fair. Be fair and equitable. And we did that by working with our partners again and making certain that those that were disproportionately affected and underserved were prioritized in the grant making that we did, and we did do that, and we continue to do that. Again, everything was our goal to be fair, to be efficient, and to be effective. And tonight we talk about a piece of that. We talk about a piece of cultural equity and the importance of championing those policies and practices of cultural equity that empower a just and inclusive and equitable community. The necessity of including all voices throughout this great city. And that is what we plan to do, and that is what we will do as we undertake cultural equity within the parameters of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit more. But one of the things that we've been doing for the last few years with regard to cultural equity, you just witnessed a little bit of it. You just witnessed the Lowell Chamber Orchestra. And you're going to witness two other performances tonight that are likewise the result of the work that the foundation does in promoting cultural equity. And that is because those individuals, in addition, of course, we've got Free Soil Arts that you're going to hear in a little while, and we've got We Are America that you're going to hear about in a little while. And those programs, those entities exist because the Greater Lowell Community Foundation is their fiscal sponsor. And what that means is we wrap around them the organizational support, the fiscal support, the legal support, the reporting, all of that. So what they need to focus on is their program, so that they can do the work that they need to do to promote their program. And they do that underneath the GLCF 04 number. And that's 3 of probably a dozen of cultural equity fiscal sponsorships we're doing, which is a dozen out of about 40 that we do. So for me, if I look at and I think of philanthropy and our grassroots philanthropy, it doesn't get any more grassroots than the programs that we've been seeing, that you'll see here tonight, and that we like to sponsor through our fiscal sponsorships. And then, of course, we've got Mosaic Lowell. And that is a program that I'm really excited to talk about. Mosaic Lowell, some of you may already be familiar with it. It's the Economic Arts and Cultural Plan for the city of Lowell. And it's for the entire city of Lowell. We have key partnerships, and one of our very real key partnerships is the Lowell Plan. Thank you, Allison, for being there with us. And many others that we work with throughout the city, including, of course, the city of Lowell, who was extremely important with this. And, of course, we've got another great, great partner and a supporter, funder, who is really assisting us greatly with all of this, and that is the Bar Foundation with San Wong, who you're going to hear about a little bit later and is with us here tonight, of course. So we looked to start this particular initiative back in 2019, but as we rolled into the beginning of 2020, something happened to get in the way of all that. And we said the key thing that we want to do with Mosaic Lowell is the engagement of everybody in the city, all the different voices that support all the different entities in our community. And so we put it on hold for the obvious reason that we weren't going to have the ability to gather the people together and do the talking and and we relaunched it again in and early 20s. So we a little bit. In the living room. If you want to get engaged in Mosaic Lowell, contact us, because we need everybody and want everybody to be engaged in this process. And you think about the city of Lowell, and if you look at what Cool puts out or any of the flyers that come out of Case from the city, and you look at all the different events, there is a tremendous amount that goes on within this community. We have got a great consultant, Civic Moxie, that's working with us on this. And as we look to inventory the cultural assets, if you will, in the city of Lowell, she said, I've worked in many cities. I've yet to see one that has as many cultural assets as you have in the city of Lowell. So that's wonderful news. The other side of that equation is we don't coordinate. Whole collection of all that talent in a coordinated and organized way is going to be amazing for this city. I think it will make Lowell a destination place. I think we wrap around that an appropriate business plan. It's a key thing as when we go on this. And of course, when we were starting on this, everyone's going cultural this, we got to do this, we got to do this. I'm going business plan. Business plan. We got to wrap a business plan around this. This does not work if we can't sustain it. So there's all those things that need to come together. And I have great optimism that we can bring all those things together. Because again, we are doing this from a grassroots perspective. So last week, we presented Mosaic Lowell to the city of Lowell. And it was well received, as I suspected it would be. I've been speaking with the city manager and The CFO for the city of Lowell is part of the steering committee for Mosaic Lowell. When I talk about needing to know where the revenues are to support this, that was an instrumental person to be on that particular steering committee. But as I finished the presentation, the city councilors each had some comments. And I want to share with you the last comment that was made that evening from Councilor Vesna Noon. And what he said about the inclusiveness process, quote unquote, you not only invited the community to the dance, but you asked them to dance this time. And you may even have them choose their own song. This is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the city will be there every step of the way. So, let's dance. So now it's my pleasure to do the 2021 Business Philanthropy Partner Award. And as many folks may know, the motto for the city is art is the handmaiden of human good. And nowhere is that better exemplified than at Western Avenue Studios in the Lofts. Lofts developer Carl Fry purchased Western Ave in 2004. And Carl and his partner, Patty Cullen, have worked tirelessly to continue to improve the building and grounds as a place for artists, artisans, and craftsmen to work, and art lovers and patrons to visit and shop. It is GLCF's pleasure, and my pleasure, to award the 2021 Business Philanthropy Partner Award to Western Avenue Studios and Lofts. I invite Carl Fry to join me and accept this award. Carl, before I hand this to you, I want to let you know it weighs about 8 pounds. It's a lot heavier than it looks, so congratulations.
If I'm not mistaken, that was made at Western Avenue.
Probably was. Hold that, and let's get a good picture with Kevin, okay?
Thanks, Kevin. I am simply delighted to accept this award on behalf of the community that is Western Avenue Studios and Lofts, a community 15 years in the making that is now likely the largest community of artists and artisans in the entire country. It is a virtuous cycle when Western Avenue exists in a region that is so supportive of the arts that we are then able to return that spirit and support the programs that are important to the good work done by the Greater Lowell Community Foundation. Thank you for all you do.
It is now my pleasure to do the 2021 Stephen Jacquis Community Connector Award. The Greater Lowell Community Foundation Stephen Jacquis Community Connector Award recognizes an individual or organization in our community that has advanced cultural equity in Greater Lowell. Vladimir Saldana was selected as the 2021 recipient. I'd like to share from Vlad's nomination some of the words that were included. As we all know, the pandemic has been very disruptive for many of us. Vlad quickly understood that we were all in the same storm, but not all in the same boat. For this reason, he called upon his friends and organized a Latino-specific mutual aid network. Vlad became involved because he acknowledged that the Latino members in our community lack the access and resources necessary in the city. It is the Foundation's great pleasure to award the 2021 GLCF Stephen Jacquis Community Award to Vladimir, a sales associate and property manager at Eagle Group and founder of Fortaleza. I invite Vlad to come up and accept this award with me, and I would ask Steve Jacquis to please come up as well. I'll give you a hug. How you doing, pal? Good.
Do Steve say a few words, or I say a few words?
No, Steve gets to present you with the award.
All right. Do you want me to say a few words first?
No, we're going to take a picture first. Come on.
Okay. It's not that long.
All right. You need to hold it. It's not your,
We
it's
didn't practice
Gerald.
this.
Well, I
We
know we
didn't
didn't
practice.
practice this.
All right. Well, I'm going to set it down. I'm going to say a few words.
Thanks.
I know we have some listener at home, right? That's also part of the hybrid event. Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, I hope you're awake. It's my pleasure to be here with you all. I'm really honored to receive this distinguished award. To follow in Steve Jonka's footsteps is a tall order, and I mean that in the literal sense, because if you guys see, he's not a short man. But all jokes aside, I'm incredibly humble and grateful to be selected as the recipient of an award that highlights the values and spirit of Mr. Jacquis, as someone that has served, led, and continues to do incredible deeds for our city. As I reflected on this year's ceremony theme, cultural equity, I wrote down some thoughts that I would like to share with you. Culture is a flavor, an energy, a silent language that gives breath to everything and everyone, but most importantly, it's an evolution. To be Black, Dominican, and an immigrant in this community, I'm inspired by the trails and path that were carved by trailblazers, rule breakers, organizers, and leaders that came before me. My immigrant lineage teaches me that we're integral to this community, even when our assistance is dismissed. And as I said earlier, culture is an evolution. Lowell is going through a transformational period, and we're in a unique position to make our city stronger. I believe that for Lowell to thrive and succeed, we must continue to do process improvement of our social, political, and cultural practices. As you all know, this November will be our first election cycle with a district-based system designed to elect counselor and school committee from across our city and in neighborhoods. I'm incredibly proud to have been one of the first members of the coalition to sign my name to the lawsuit that brought upon this change. I dare to say that because of this initiative, we have the largest number of people of color running for office. So that's something to applaud, yeah. And not just a large slate of people running, but these leaders have so much to offer our city. They bring innovative ideas fueled by their personal experience. They bring a desire to make the city stronger and more inclusive, and they bring courage. The courage it takes to put yourself out there when it's not clear whether you'll be well received. These offerings are a gift and a promise of culturally diversity and inclusion in position of leadership. I encourage you to support and vote for these candidates that will bring those voices to the forefront. However, the work doesn't solely lie there, and I think Jay spoke about the plan, right, the Mosaic Plan, but there's more work to be done. And as leaders of organization, institution, businesses in our community, ask yourself constantly, whose stories are being told? Who is sitting in the decision-making table, and what voices are being heard? Next time you are sitting in a seat of power, look around you. And if everyone there looks like you, thinks like you, then demand better. Because oppressive ideas and structural oppression absolutely harm marginalized community, but they also hinder our economic development for our city, and they slow down innovation and growth. So as much as our elected officials do not or cannot bear to hear the word equity, I strongly believe we need an equity approach to ensure that all communities in Lowell are recognized in our civic life, equitably served by our institution, equitably invested with our dollars. So Lowell is a city that has the right ingredients. The opportunity to be a booming city is waiting, and I believe that we have the raw material to become the model city in this region, but we must band together to craft the future of the city to craft the city that we deserve as a city. So with that, thank you for listening, and thank you to the Lowell Community Foundation and the selection committee, and lastly but not least, I thank to my nominator for this wonderful recognition.
Not only does he get this award that he can display prominently wherever he wishes to, he gets a check from the Greater Lowell Community Foundation
Nice. I got my
on behalf
personal?
of, it's not a personal check,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I have my account ready to deposit it. Drinks on me tonight.
Fortaleza, $1,000.
Thank you. Oh, and quick, do you mind just telling me what Fortaleza is?
Pardon me?
Fortaleza?
Fortaleza.
Yeah, the organization that's getting it?
Yes.
So they know it's a...
I said that, but I didn't say it right. I don't say it, you said it.
No,
I don't have the...
Fortaleza is the organization getting the grant. It's a newly
I'm an Irish
founded...
guy trying to say this word.
Well, it means a lot of things, but it's a Latino advocacy organization that's founded me and a few other members of Lowell.
Okay. So you guys will hear again from me towards the end of the program, but I want to welcome back our wonderful MC, Sophan.
Well, that is going to be a hard act to follow, my goodness. So congratulations to all of our award recipients. I love seeing the changes in Lowell. I am a Lowellian. I grew up in the city. I love this city, and I'm always talking and bragging about the city of Lowell. And just like Vlad said, you know, there's a lot of great flavors in the city of Lowell, and I always tell that to everyone. Come to Lowell and come try all the different flavors and the cultures that we have here. It's amazing. So thank you for your work in our community. I now have the honor of introducing the We Are America Project. The We Are America Project is a national project founded by Lowell High School teacher Jessica Lander and her former students to spark conversations about the many dimensions of American identity in classrooms across the country. Please welcome two of We America Project's student co-founders, Lucy Ruby Kabuka and Philly Marte.
Hello, my name is Lucira Kabuba, and I would like to tell you about how the We America Project was born. In 2018, I was a senior at Lowell High School, and my classmates and I decided to sign up for a class that we thought was just like any other class. That class was a seminar on American diversity. We soon learned that this course would be a very different course from what we had taken before. In class, we studied about the history of our country's fight to freedom, and we were allowed to share who we were, where we came from, in many ways that we weren't used to. Together, we decided to talk about the many dimensions of American diversity. After sharing our stories together in class, we decided to tell the stories publicly in the form of a published book. Each of us sharing a part of our own story of American identity. My story was about my realization of how America is versus how I was told when I was growing up. We felt while our stories might be different, we're still connected. We took what we had written and shared it however we could. We spoke on the radio, in newspapers, and at universities, and so on. We believed that it was very important for us to share these stories. At the end of the year in 2019, my classmates and I gathered together in our teacher's classroom, Ms. Lander's classroom. We also wanted other students to experience the same experience that we had. We didn't want the project to end, so we decided to map up what it would take to make a project national. And we were set on making it a reality. For the past 3 years, my co-founders and I have worked with teachers from across the country. We have worked with more than 50 teachers in 25 US states, who have in turn worked with more than 1,000 students to help them tell a part of the story, a part of their own American identity. Throughout the year, we have met the teachers virtually and helped them support in helping them teach our curriculum in their schools. In turn, they have supported their students in telling the story of self. These powerful stories live on our websites and in books that we fund that are shared in their communities. Together, to make this work national, we have been honored to work with 3 fantastic national educational organizations. We are also deeply grateful with our partnership with the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, who has championed our work from the very beginning. Our goal as the We Are America project is to inspire other students to share their stories of what makes them American. Throughout history, many voices have been silenced, but we now have a chance to elevate these voices. There is strength and beauty in reading someone else's story and realizing you're not alone. There is strength and beauty in realizing that when you read a story and you find that you might have something in common with someone who you didn't really think that you would. In many ways, we hope people, young and old, would find a feeling of belonging in this country. There's a power in telling a story, and we hope to continue using it as a tool today, tomorrow, and always. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Philly Marte, and I'm going to be reading my own story, which is a small snippet of the original We Are America. We're actually selling this one in the latest edition, and soon We Are America Taiwan in that back desk over there. So now my story, titled We Still Have Work to Do. I have always known diversity in the classroom, the workplace, and in life. While I was growing up, my dad owned a bodega in downtown Manhattan. People who came in were from all corners of the world. Hispanics getting rice and beans and spilling the neighborhood drama. Caucasians trying out different kinds of meats, getting lottery tickets, and trying out their Spanish. Immigrants from all over Asia buying rice, comparing it to how they made it in their home country. African Americans getting milk and eggs. Everyone always seemed united at our store. Everyone chatting with one another, no noticeable differences, no judgment as far as we could tell. This was the same story when we moved to Teaneck, New Jersey, where we had a bodega, then to Haverhill, Massachusetts, where we worked at my uncle's bodega. For a few months, we lived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. While we didn't have a store there, our streets were a splash of many colors in itself. My older brother was a social bug of the streets, so I followed him around. Talking to his friends who are of all races, Caucasian, Asian, African, and of course, Hispanic. We didn't notice or care about these differences. We all liked games, video games, and sports, baseball and basketball, usually. There were no boundaries to what we could do beyond it getting too late and having our moms call us home. It was the same when we moved to Lowell, a place made from many pieces of the world. Some born and raised in Lowell, some from Puerto Rico, Haiti, Iraq, the Philippines, Portugal, Thailand, the Sierra Leone, just to name a few. We all had similar struggles and goals. It seemed to be a place of pure diversity. Growing up, I thought the whole world was like this, full of people of different colors who supported and cared for one another. But school taught me otherwise. In classes, we learned of the mass expulsion of Native Americans in the 1740s, the Irish mistreatment in Boston in the 1850s, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, the mass arrest and deportation of Mexican Americans to Los Angeles in 1931, the ongoing the ongoing crimes committed by white Americans more massacre, and the modern day Me Too movement. And I've come to realize there is still much work needing to be done. I recently had the privilege of traveling down to Montgomery, Alabama. I found it to be very different there. I saw places where the heroes of history and places of importance are different from the ones I grew up with. While there, I saw these tremendous works of art, but they all came with such a dark history. A fountain beautifully crafted, but built on the site of a major slave market. A towering statue honoring fallen Confederates. A statue honoring the President of the Confederacy shining through the night. There was an ugly history that came with the beautiful works of art. I didn't understand that while I view some people as villains of history, others may see them as heroes or honorable. Growing up with such diversity in my life, I realized I've grown up blind to racism, sexism, and other kinds of exclusion. Blind to all the negative parts of our history. Blind to all the fighting that it took for me to enjoy my life the way I was. Without seeing the history in these places with my own eyes, I would still be partially blind. Now I can see that the fight isn't over. Not everyone could enjoy the life I had. And until every kid from every corner of the world can enjoy the beauty of our diverse and accepting community, we still have work to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy and Philly. That was amazing. Thank you both for sharing your story. And you're right, Lowell is a very diverse city. You know, growing up, one of my favorite stories to share to tell folks how diverse city of Lowell is. My best friend growing up, she's Puerto Rican, or otherwise known as a Boricua. She taught me how to make arroz con pollo, and I showed her how to make ramen noodles gourmet style. Till this day, that's how she eats her noodles. And, you know, Lucy, you also talked about how there's beauty in not knowing someone, but understanding that we have a lot more in common than we sometimes think. For example, let's say if you look at me and Jay Linehan, on the surface, we may look very different. But you know what? You probably didn't know this. Since he's an Irishman, my stepdad is Irish. So we just might see each other the next St. Patrick's holiday event. So thank you again to Lucy and Philly. What an amazing project, and thank you again for sharing your story. And so next, ladies and gentlemen, I am so thrilled to introduce this year's keynote speaker. I had the pleasure of meeting her last night, and she's amazing, and I can't wait to share her story. San Wong directs Bar's Arts and Creativity Portfolio. She currently serves on the board of Grantmakers in the Arts, a national leadership and service organization that supports the growth of arts and culture. Prior to joining BAR in 2012, Sansan served as Director of Grants at the San Francisco Arts Commission, Executive Director of the National Performance Network, Director of Development and Special Initiatives at Theater Autad, and as a performing arts producer and presenter. As an international arts consultant, her clients included the Ford Foundation, Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, New England Foundation of the Arts, and Res Artistes, among many others. I mean, if that is not impressive. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, a huge round of applause for our keynote speaker, Ms. San Wong.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so honored to be here with you tonight to talk about the transformative power of arts, culture, and creativity. First, I just want to express my kudos to the artists who are performing tonight. Thank you for your gifts. You speak truth. And for powerfully demonstrating how art can stir a range of emotions for us individually and to bring us together experience. It's been a privilege to get to know the Lowell and to be in partnership with the Greater Lowell Community Foundation and the Lowell Plan in the Mosaic planning process. Background. I mean, Sophan how intersected the themes of culture and art. I'm a child of immigrants. My father worked his father in laundry and sent me back to my mother and two brothers. Because of quotas on Chinese immigrants, my parents were separated for 10 years before they could live here together. When I was born in Boston, my parents didn't think they could take care of me, so they were going to send me back to Hong Kong to be cared for by my grandmother. The hours in the laundry were just too long to take care of me or a newborn baby. Instead, they were able to petition to bring my grandmother to Boston and keep our family intact. I had friends whose parents were similarly separated. I think of this as my first brush with structural racism. We all worked in the laundry, and my grandmother worked in garment factories. Eventually, my father started working in restaurants to learn the trade so that we could start our own restaurant. The laundry was located in Roxbury Mission Hill in Boston, which was predominantly Irish Catholic, then became predominantly Black, then Latino immigrant, and now gentrifying because of its proximity to hospitals and colleges. However, even as the demographics of the neighborhood changed, my family was always the other. Boston always felt like a Black-white city of segregated ethnic neighborhoods. I also grew up around the height of busing and desegregation in Boston. We didn't go to public schools, but I do have memories of white parents stoning a bus full of Black children, protest of busing. The only time I wasn't the other was on weekends. And I spent time in Boston, Chinatown, which is one of the oldest in the United States, dating. This is when we felt like we belonged. We saw people who looked like us. We went to Chinese language and culture school, where I learned Chinese characters, folk dance, lion dancing, Chinese brush painting and crafts, things that I would not be taught in my other school, that would help me better understand and feel connected to my heritage. From these experiences, I hold a deep, deep appreciation for how immigrant communities so entrepreneurially create parallel systems of support and mutual aid, whereas mainstream systems require assimilation rather than promoting accessibility and pluralism. I received training in Western European art forms, but it was as an adult working with Asian American jazz artists who were active in the Yellow Power movement and with artists from Korea, Japan, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, who are working in their cultures' art forms, both traditional and contemporary evolutions, that I found my artistic soul. I feel privileged that while growing up without a lot of financial resources, I've been able to find my voice and to fight so that the cultural expressions of voices of others are respected, resourced, and elevated. Over the last few years, we've seen a rise in authoritarianism and hate. This pandemic has laid bare the multitude of social, health, and economic inequities. Fighting for racial and cultural equity are particularly urgent now, and the isolation that we've experienced uncovered a deep-rooted need for community and connection. Through these crises, we've learned where people turn to cope, to survive. Recently, Barr Foundation partnered with Slover Lynette on a national research project with a deep dive in Massachusetts to better understand the role of arts, culture, community in this time of transition. Through this study, we learned how deeply arts and culture are integrated into people's lives. 93% of Massachusetts residents have done personal creative activities during the pandemic. 74% engage with arts and culture online. Almost 2/3 rated the importance of art and culture organizations highly. Arts and culture matter deeply to people in this state, and there's a critical role for arts to play as we imagine a way forward. So my question to you all is this: what do we do in this moment that is so ripe for disruption? We cannot return to a pre-pandemic normal, because what was normal, with all of its inequities, was not acceptable. We have to push ourselves into a new, evolved normal, one that is more vibrant and more equitable. As Lowell embarks on its collective journey towards an equitable future, I'm part of you and part of this community. And I want to be able to share with you some of the things that I've learned and experienced about the transformative power of the arts in building that future. There are so many bright spots in my personal and professional life. Incredible stories of arts, of communities using arts interventions to bring people together, to celebrate the multiplicity of cultures, and to catalyze civic engagement and investment. And when I reflect on these bright spots, there are 3 common tenets that rise to the top that I want to share with you tonight. The first is belonging, and we just heard these incredible stories from 2 young people. Having a sense of belonging is fundamental human need, and building that sense of belonging means creating connections to people and place. In my experience, the most successful interventions are those that recognize and lift up cultural history and context of place or community. Artistic and creative processes are increasingly infused into cultural development, community development, and planning, giving residents alternative platform for refusing to settle for the same tactics that reinforce inequities, and encouraging a more collective dreaming about alternative solutions that are not. So let's look at creative place keeping efforts in Boston Chinatown. So while Chinatowns are usually seen as exotic tourism spots with cheap, delicious food, a touch point for home country and cultural identity. Chinatowns are also fascinating immigrant transit stops where you can track successive waves of immigrants from different regions of China. As families save money, they can afford to move to better neighborhoods, but return to Chinatown for shopping, big family meals, connecting with extended family, and teaching children about their heritage. I wanted to share with you a little story. As part of Boston's urban renewal in the 1960s and 70s, the Chinese Merchants Building, the one that now says, "Welcome to Chinatown," was literally cut in half to make room for the freeway. And on nearby Hudson Street, the homes of immigrants were demolished. Chinatown is again in danger of shrinking from overdevelopment and gentrification. In an effort to stave off this encroachment, about 5 years ago, the Asian Community Development Corporation worked with a private developer to reclaim the Hudson Street parcel. They partnered with Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center and Bunker Hill Community College to develop Chinatown's first art center, the Powell Art Center, on the ground floor of a new high-rise apartment building that had a mix of high-end market and low-income affordable apartments. Unbelievably, or maybe not so unbelievable, there are separate entrances for high-end and low-income residents. The Powell Art Center represents the belief that investing in arts, culture, and creativity is vital to the health and well-being of individuals, families, and vibrant communities. With the presence of Powell, arts and culture have been infused through all the social service provision at BCNC. And you may know BCNC because they're currently working with the Cambodian Mutual Assistance Association of Lowell to address gambling in Asian communities. And they're just getting ready to launch a new initiative that includes cultural activities in treating in addressing addiction. So Powell was founded to be a more permanent anchor for Chinatown identity, to host social and community life led by artists, youth, and residents, to retain its heritage and design a future, welcoming all members regardless of income and race. Powell was created to be Chinatown's third space, that after your first and second spaces of home and your school or workplace, a third space is where you relax in public, where you encounter familiar faces and make new acquaintances. Third spaces strengthen social infrastructure, create opportunities for the coexistence of different viewpoints and debate, which are important for democracy and civic engagement. Powell, for me, is a place where culture is alive and it continues to evolve, nurtured by the work of artists. This continual presence is even more important when media reinforces negative stereotypes and amid the rise of anti-Asian hate from international trade and more recently heightened by COVID. Symbolically, Powell is an act of resistance against the pressures of gentrification, overdevelopment, and exploitive tourism. Powell does a lot of interventions in the community, and these intimate interventions actively engage community members in the process of belonging on personal, group, community, and across generations. Belonging means to be part of something, and when a place begins to reflect the identity, history, and narrative of cultural communities within it, it stops just being a place where people live and starts being a community where people engage. Arts are building these relationships, creating events that bring people together and provide multiple entryways to get to know your neighbor. I want to talk about my second tenet, which is collective public imagination. So if we think that belonging is rooted in a community's history and context, collective public imagination is focused on the future. Imagination is the ability we have to form pictures and ideas in our mind of things that are new and exciting, of things that we've not yet experienced. Some of the most impactful interventions stem from communities broadening their mindsets, imagining new possibilities, envisioning different ways of doing things. This has been an important idea for Barr Foundation in our work in gateway cities. Collective public imagination can instill civic pride, spark hope, and bring people together. So I want to give a big shout out to Project Learn, the Art Up Lowell initiative, and Beyond Walls for your vision in bringing temporary and permanent public art into public spaces across Lowell. 2 50-plus foot high murals that reflect Puerto Rican and Dominican Republic communities, one on Mechanics Hall that was a hub for the abolitionist movement and a safe space for African Americans and their allies to participate in anti-slavery activities. The bringing together of these history and this future and this current is an amazing juxtaposition expressing the same desire for freedom and equality. Americans for the Arts talked about the power of art rather succinctly in this statement. Cities gain value through public art, cultural, social, economic value. Public art humanizes the built environment and invigorates public spaces. So let's look beyond Wall's founding and work in Lowell, another one of our gateway cities, in Lynn, and another one of our gateway cities. Beyond Walls activates space to strengthen community by creating epic public art and cultivating the support of government, business, community, and residents. Like the 2 murals in Lowell, there are incredibly uplifting and beautiful murals that are inspired by stories gathered from residents and histories of communities in Lynn. Building owners donated walls and suspended their caution in favor of taking a leap of imagination. The first set of murals were strategically sited on key streets and intersections, so they were the first things you saw when you entered the downtown district, when you got off the train, when you passed by on the commuter rail. In essence, these murals dominated your vision, framed your first encounter with Lynn, and began to change the public narrative and brand of Lynn. The Mural Festival drew thousands of residents and visitors to downtown Lynn. I encourage you to go down to Lynn and see these. One of the early Beyond Wall projects illustrates how community service and connection intertwine with the arts. During meetings facilitated by Mass Development's Transformative Districts Initiative, community members indicated a desire for safer walking conditions and public spaces. In particular, better lighting under commuter rail underpasses where there are high incidence of crime. Beyond Walls founder Al Wilson recruited architecture and lighting experts to make a visual underpass lighting. So it helped others imagine what the intervention would be. Rounds of crowdfunding with small trenches and hard materials and electrical services. And 2 years later, there's a visually playful symphony of colors lighting installations in 3 underpasses. This could have been the standard harsh white lighting, but instead you have a creative solution that delivers safety, an essential human need, along with something that sparks your mind to say it is possible to have public spaces beautiful and essential human right. I introduced this segment by speaking to the importance of engaging public imagination as a way to bring forward new futures and communities. I want to reinforce this theme with a few thoughts. I believe that public art is a powerful way to galvanize what Drusilla Cornell describes as a forward-looking public imagination that builds a future and a different way of seeing things. Public imagination can be collective imagination, built up from the ground up to mobilize social change. Art should be for everyone. Art can bring awareness to social causes. Artists are activists who have a responsibility to expose injustices of all kinds. Artists can activate the creativity of our communities to collectively imagine and move forward to a better, more equitable future. Artists feed and invite public imagination, encouraging people to embrace art's randomness, its fun, its joy, and its art's unexpectedness that will bring us out of our homes and into public spaces. Collective imagination is possible when we move from a mindset of no to a culture of yes. Which brings me to my third and final tenet, risk-taking. In this section, I want to share some examples of what can happen when philanthropy embraces risk, particularly sharing some examples from BAR and our Community Foundation partners in the Creative Commonwealth Initiative. One of BAR's values is embrace risk. We accept that bold action requires comfort with the risk of failure. I would posit, however, that failure is when we do not take the risk to advance our ideas. Failure is when we do not learn from what happens and use that knowledge to inform our next efforts. It's in the nature of art and question, take risk, push boundaries, and what's seen. I like this quote from the filmmaker George Lucas, who did the Star Wars. If you're creating things, you're doing things that have the high potential for failure, especially if you're doing things that haven't been done before. And you learn from those things. Failure is another word for experience. I think that embracing risk is complemented by another one of BAR's values, which is demonstrate curiosity, inviting new perspectives to inform our work and to help us learn. In philanthropy, we have to examine our role in supporting ideas and efforts of the people most impacted. The scope of our work enables us to learn about a broad range of efforts in communities, but oftentimes it's too small a percentage that pass through all of our filters. Too often, it's because someone knows someone with power. It's philanthropy's responsibility to put in place mechanisms that surface wider and wider swaths to inform our knowledge of an ecosystem. For Bar Arts, we are privileged to work with many capable and visionary partners like regional community foundations, like Greater Lowell Community Foundation. So our approach is to seed new bold ideas by providing risk capital and knowledge and patient capital in building capacity to leverage change. We know we don't have all the answers, so we ask a lot of questions. We also think that by working in partnership towards collectively agreed upon goals, we're mitigating risk in our gaps in knowledge and the risk that change won't take. We encourage our grantees and our partners to be generative in the questions they ask about the problems they're trying to solve and how their approach might leverage change to build healthier, more resilient arts ecosystem and thriving communities. I want to talk a little bit about the Creative Commonwealth Initiative. About 5 years ago, BAR moved from being a Boston-focused foundation to being a regional one, and the arts program expanded our focus from Boston to Massachusetts. We knew that cities and towns across Massachusetts are full of creative talent and cultural assets, but that access to funding and opportunities to experience arts and creativity could be vastly uneven. We recognized that we didn't have deep knowledge about communities across the state, so we looked for partners we could trust. At that time, you may remember, donor-advised funds were one of the fastest growing philanthropic areas. I bet it's with commercial vendors. Could we get a piece of that action for the arts? Arts and culture were often included in giving, although funds were usually restricted to organizations that donors knew and were familiar with. Because funds were restricted, community foundations did not have a lot of discretionary funds. We asked some questions. What would happen if BAR partnered to provide unrestricted discretionary funds? What strategic innovations would community foundations undertake if unfeathered from fund restrictions? What could happen if community foundations brought their deep community knowledge and BAR brought financial resources and arts expertise? Could we together strategically change regional arts ecosystems to be more accessible, equitable, and sustainable? So we believe that community foundations have knowledge, relationships, credibility to infuse arts and creativity into civic life. They convene organizations across sectors, bring new information and insights to decision makers, raise public awareness about key issues and opportunities, and spur collaboration among those who make arts and creativity possible with their communities. With this hypothesis that we wanted to test, we launched the Creative Commonwealth Initiative in 2017 as a 6-year initiative beginning with an R&D process with 5 community foundations. After a couple of years, though, we realized that 6 years wasn't sufficient to support the startup efforts, experiment, mature programs, develop new resources, and make it stick. So we changed the initiative from 6 years to a 10-year arc. The initiative has 3 goals: to strengthen arts and creativity in communities by deepening financial support and improving local arts policy. Second, to form a learning community that shares successes and challenges and enhances the capacity of each participating foundation. And lastly, to offer a model of constructive partnership between private and community foundations and civic entities. 5 years later, each of these community foundation partners have taken a lot of risk and embarked on some incredible experiments. I'd like to share a few high-level observations and lessons from our partnership that may be helpful to the Lowell community as it continues on its planning journey. First, consider engaging in co-design process with your community. We found it effective to partner with community members to understand what they and their neighbors want. It helps to engage them where they live in playful, creative ways so they're part of solution generation. The Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation started with a participatory research project in Pittsfield, where teams of residents surveyed their neighbors about the art they wanted in public spaces. Early on, the Community Foundation of Western Mass established a team of community advisors to continue to co-facilitate, co-design, and co-lead activities. Second, think about what it would mean to take an ecosystem approach, including working across sectors that comprise your community. Creative Commonwealth partners have pursued systems-level work and change and have helped foster systemic support for arts and culture across the region through efforts like grant-making, large and small-scale cross-sector convening, capacity-building training, online art hubs, and municipal planning that's inclusive of arts and culture. My final learning to share from this partnership is to focus on building and funding the capacity for leadership, experimentation, and activity. We've seen that giving community foundations discretionary power to identify their needs and design their own approaches has provided them with the necessary space and support to further build community leadership, connections, and engagement. One of these examples is Essex County's Changemaker program. It's an 8-month leadership support program for creative civic leaders that includes facilitated project-based learning, peer networking, leadership training designed to open new critical pathways for cultural equity. These cohort members will put their learnings into action with $1,000 microgrants by developing projects to further inspire the future of their communities. We think that these lessons have come with real-life impact in creative community regions. Halfway through this 10-year initiative, we're beginning to see some incredible beginnings. Arts organizations are collaborating in new ways to include large and small, culturally diverse, and from different communities. They are recognizing that they are stronger together. We're seeing that the capacity building of people to be innovative and strategic has helped the creative economy adapt quickly to interpret this new world. Arts and culture are seen as economic drivers and as critical components of community solutions. Business and municipal agencies are beginning to understand that arts improves the overall health of a city, so we are seeing greater corporate support and funding for arts organizations and projects, and more interest in establishing arts-friendly policy. Finally, one of the most notable outcomes is the role of the Community Foundation. It has shifted from being a transactional grant maker to being a trusted advisor, co-investing in community transformation, very much what you heard tonight with the Greater Lowell Community Foundation. Community foundations are conveners, bringing together arts and culture nonprofits to share ideas, concerns, stories. We've seen them connect with donors in new and engaging ways, and in their long-term commitment, they've taken on a posture of learning. So in closing, I see that a very similar long-term commitment is what brought us here together tonight. The Greater Lowell Community Foundation and the civic leaders in this room and joining online are making a commitment to cultural equity. And that is a first important step in building trust required for change. Because Mosaic Lowell, or any cultural planning process, is not just about the product of the plan. It's about the process of building trust. It's about having potentially uncomfortable conversations that generate respect of diverse cultural expressions and a sense of belonging. It's about taking risk to explore how arts can intersect with health services, small businesses, or transportation. It's about creating community relationships that endure. I started this evening by acknowledging this very unique moment of time that we're in. And as I close, my advice to all of you is don't waste it. Don't squander this moment that's so ripe for disruption, for exploration, for change. Lean into the transformative power of the arts and boldly imagine a brighter, more vibrant, more equitable future for Lowell. Thank you.
I told you, she's amazing. So thank you, Sansan, for those inspiring words, for sharing your story, especially about your family. That was amazing. Thank you. Our final organization and performance this evening is the Free Soil Arts Collective, and I'm so excited to introduce this next person because when you meet her, you'll remember who she is because she always radiates positivity. The Free Soil Arts Collective is an arts organization based right here in Lowell with a mission to amplify and strengthen the voices of artists of color. So please welcome Krista Brown, founder of the Free Soil Arts Collective.
Hello, everyone. Folks in the house, folks at the house. My name is Krista Brown, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Free Soil Arts Collective. As Sophan said, our mission is to amplify and strengthen the voices of artists of color. We do this by creating and facilitating paid opportunities for local artists of color to work with us on the development of theatrical productions, educational programs, and events. By employing BIPOC artists, BIPOC meaning Black, Indigenous, and people of color, we are building a pipeline of both patrons and participants that accurately reflects the cultural richness of our community. Our name is a unique one, Free Soil. It is an homage to Nathaniel Booth. In the late 1800s, a freedom seeker named Nathaniel Booth escaped to Lowell, Massachusetts. A group called the Free Soil Party advocated for his freedom and his safety. Their motto was free soil, free labor, free men, saying that those who work the soil deserve to be free. So it is our belief that those who come from underrepresented communities in the arts have the right to tell their own stories. Independent research that we've conducted so far shows that we are the first organization to be led by a Black person in the Merrimack Valley, the second to be led by a person of color in Lowell. Woo! Thank you. We've been fortunate to have the Greater Lowell Community Foundation as our fiscal sponsor since the very beginning. That's January 2019 for us. And this relationship, this partnership, has enabled us to grow, to learn best practices on running a nonprofit organization. It's given us an EIN number to use. And if anything, it's giving us shoulders to lean on, text people, I'm looking at you, Jennifer, people that text with questions, a magical, magical group of support. This work is deeply personal to me. I came to Lowell in 2012, fresh with a BFA in theater. All right, money. Yes, thank you. So when I came to Lowell, my whole goal was to kind of get a sense of the arts scene here and just kind of move my way in. What I saw was really something that I did not see, and that was opportunities for actors that looked like me to do things here in the community. So I waited and I waited and I waited, and soon enough I was commuting to Boston, Chelsea. I was leaving my community to be part of the art that so desperately fed my soul. And it kind of started to upset me and frustrate me, and I thought somebody's going to come up with this idea. Somebody's going to start an organization focused on the arts, and they're going to focus on people of color, and I'm just going to wait. 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 Just wait. So it was like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and I was like, girl, it's you. Like, if it's on your heart for that long, usually it means that you're the one who's called to bring it to fruition. So that's truly how Free Soil came to be. I thought that we were going to raise all of this money and do all of these amazing projects when somebody who was on the Community Foundation's board told me, Krista, you can't do that. You may need to get a fiscal sponsor. So I met with Jay Linehan at Purple Carrot downtown, and I shared my truth. I shared my frustrations. I shared my vision, and he got it almost instantly. You see, I walk every day around a community that is so rich in culture, food, history, food, stories, food. But when I went to the stages and the galleries and the performance halls, the art in my community, that richness was not reflected back at me. So Free Soil is working on that. We welcome a broad range of genres and aesthetic approaches from actors, singers, and visual designers to rappers, writers, and fashion designers. hungry for paid opportunities in their own community, hungry for a network of professionals and peers that look like them. In less than 3 years, we have employed 60 artists of color from our community, distributing nearly 75% of our 2021 revenue directly back into the hands of artists already. Thank you. Implementing programs like Rhythm and Rhyme, where young people learn how to express themselves through poetry, taught, you guessed it, by local artists of color. Or our Theater Kids program, where young people learn how to write and perform their own plays, learning the fundamentals of storytelling, and gaining a sense of agency over their voice, taught again by, you guessed it, local artists of color. In a school district boasting over 68 languages spoken, we are introducing young people to artists that look like them, teaching them how to craft their own stories, shape their own narratives by writing and performing their own plays. We've also produced original works like Hair Tales, Stories of Black Heritage at Merrimack Repertory Theater, Towards an Anti-Racist Tomorrow in partnership with Middlesex Community College and the work of Idris Goodwin, and our first traveling theater performance through downtown Lowell that debuted last June, where nearly 100 visitors joined us outside to learn about the history and presence of Lowell's Black people. Another one of our exciting projects is called Hidden in Plain Sight, Stories of Black Lowell. Through a racial equity grant from the Community Foundation, we've interviewed 27 Black people who've either lived in Lowell or worked in Lowell, and we are turning those stories into a published book, an exhibit that will debut at the Lowell National Park Visitor Center in December, and will be developed into a play in partnership with Merrimack Repertory Theater over the course of 2-3 years. We're working with Masada Jones of the Kindred Project on conducting these interviews. I see Henry, who's helping with the project. I see Ivy, who we've talked to. And through these stories, we're hearing people who lived in Black neighborhoods in Lowell, who saw them demolished, people who remember being told, oh, it's okay, you'll come back and everything will be fine, and coming back to ruin. We have people who remember the Black neighborhoods here, remember the community, and we are going to be using art to push those stories forward, which is very, very, very exciting. We're also producing curated events like our Vital Voices series, where we highlight 6 artists of color each year through in-depth conversations, providing them with a platform to broaden their reach and their network. For the past 2 years that this series has been around, it has been sponsored by Enterprise Bank. This work is deeply, deeply personal to me. I'm one of those people who found theater at a time where I didn't feel like I had a voice. At 12 years old, I was living in Hartford, Connecticut. There was this traveling theater troupe, and they wanted people from the audience to jump on stage. And I thought, that's a little weird, I don't know. But I did it. And they asked us to come up with a password, any word. And they said, you're the guards of Hades. What's the password going to be? And I've said my favorite food then and now, which is shrimp. So I said, can it be shrimp? And they're like, sure. So we're on stage and I say, is it now? Okay. So the time came and we're ready. And they said, go, go, go. And I said, shrimp. And something came through me. Anyone involved in the arts, you know that cheesy notion that the acting bug comes and your life is changed forever. I felt like my voice mattered, my opinion mattered. And so the work that we do, to me, is amplifying voices that just aren't explored enough. Last year, we partnered with a local community organization called DIY Lowell on a project called Visualize Lowell's Black History. Through a grant from Mass Development, the mission was simple, kind of. How do you spur economic development during a pandemic while amplifying Black history? We worked in partnership with Black community members and devised public art pieces that spoke to the history and presence of Black people in this community. So today, walking along Market Street or Merrimack Street or Middlesex Street, you will see these stories. 16 historical markers showing stories like Carolyn von Vonker, the first Black woman to integrate Lowell High School in 1843, making it the first integrated high school in the nation. Did you know that? Or stories about Laura Smith, who joins us today, a staunch advocate for the success of young people, establishing the Lowell Smith Fund in 1999, providing scholarships and programs that reflect the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and responsible for the naming of Martin Luther King Jr. Way in Lowell in 2003. Did you know that? This project empowered us to take people on a journey through Lowell. So on Juneteenth last year, June 19th, the date commemorating when all enslaved people in the country knew they were free, we held an event. People followed us throughout Lowell at 6 different locations, and at every location they were met by a Black actor embodying somebody from Lowell's past or present. One of those stops involved a story that involves this very place. Here at UTEC, previously St. Paul's United Methodist Church, African survivors of the slave ship Amistad, the Mende people, spoke here about their revolt. In 1839, they revolted against their slaveholders and were subsequently brought to court on charges of murder and piracy. John Levy, a Black abolitionist and barber in Lowell, brought the survivors to speak at this church in front of 1,500 people in 1841. This was part of a tour to compensate those who helped with their legal defense. The African survivors eventually won their court case and were released from the charges. Thanks to the UMass Lowell History Department, you can learn all about this information, but St. Paul's Methodist Church is now the space that UTEC calls home. So when you go outside and you look up very, very high, you can see the steeple. Where we are right now is a part of Lowell's Black history. So for the performance portion of this, I will be doing a dramatic reading of one of the monologues that was presented at our Juneteenth celebration of somebody who may have been aboard the Amistad. I came aboard a slave ship, the Amistad, black body to black body stacked, shackled around my ankles, wrists, and neck, not even enough room to stand up straight. I traveled to destinations unknown. The year, 1839. I remember it well. 1839, the year we were pitted against our captors. We fought for our freedom, for our right to life as humans, for our God-given right to an existence, for the joy that you experience every day. I've seen the white man tie a weight onto the shackled legs of my brother and push him out into the sea. Even with a weight bringing him closer to his death, my brother still struggled to survive. My brother fought the losing battle for his life because he knew his life was worth living. Those of us who survived were brought to court on charges of murder and piracy. John Levy, a black barber here in Lowell and an abolitionist, brought us to speak at a church in front of 1,500 people as part of a tour to compensate those who had aided in our defense. Later, we would eventually win our case in court and be released from all charges. I am a survivor of the evilest things that even the human imagination is capable of conjuring up on its own. I'm certain it takes a certain kind of hate to rip men and women away from the only places they have ever known and to force them into submission. The white man crowned themselves God. Colonizers and their modern-day descendants guard the fires of white supremacy with their entire lives because they know that when it dies out, they will have nothing else to keep themselves warm. Remember today. Remember the stories that you've been told, the voices that you have heard. Remember the plight of Black people in this city and throughout the world. And fight. Fight. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you. Can you imagine sitting on the other side of a table from her and her asking you to do something and trying to say no? No. And I remember vividly the day we sat in the Purple Carrot. And it wasn't as forceful as what you just listened to, but it wasn't far from it. But one of the things that is common through the performers you've seen here today is that passion. To do the things that need to be done. We support the fiscal sponsors. It is not common amongst all the community foundations. Work. And yeah, there's hand-holding and they lean on your shoulder and they do all that stuff. But you saw what it does in this community. Talk about doing the cultural community, the cultural equity. It's going to be part of Mosaic Lowell years, but it's already a part of the Great Community Foundation. And it's already part of so many people in this room and so many people watching. So thank you all for that. We have a great, great opportunity in front of us. Thank you, Sansan. And we will not miss that opportunity. I think of the possibilities that the things that can occur in this city are just absolutely amazing. Art does break down barriers. So, I want to give great thanks to our MC, Sophan. You are amazing. Thank you all so much. Again, I want to thank the Lowell Chamber Orchestra and We Are America and Free Soul for being here with us and for the passion that they amplify every single day. There's information on all of them in the back, so please take a peek and see if there's some things that you might want to buy to support them. Their websites are on the programs on each of the tables. Again, great thanks to the Bar Foundation for recognizing that these types of efforts are so important in our community. And I just want to thank everybody for being here.